Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to this special interview with the founder of the Madina Institute, Sayyid Muhammad bin Yahya al-Ninowy, hafidhullah ta'ala. And I'm very honored to be here. Alhamdulillah, I've benefited from the Madina Institute coming here in 2015, and really a springboard for further studies, going to university, and really protecting me from certain philosophies, studying philosophy at university. And it's a real honor to see you again. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Jazakumullah khair, Sayyidi Yasin. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum. Allah bless you.
MashaAllah. One of the difficulties that I had after Medina was knowing the true path to become a true talib al-ilm in the deen, especially in today's time. What advices or what criteria is there for someone to become a true talib al-ilm on the road to scholarship in Islam?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala. First of all, after the tawfiq of Allah Ta'ala, because at the end this knowledge is and everything in the world is by His grace. So after sort of His facilitation and ikhlas and seeking knowledge, not just for accumulation of knowledge, but what is the purpose of seeking knowledge? Why do you want to seek knowledge? I remember with that, my father, Allah have mercy on his soul and on all the Muslims who passed away and everybody, sending me to one of my shuyukh to study, and he told me, go and ask him to teach you. Going to him, I knocked the door and I said, he opened the door. He's a friend of my father. He says, what are you doing? I said, I came here. He said, why? I said, to study. He says, what do you want to study for? He says, so I told him, I was surprised. What do you mean? I'm trying to study knowledge. What do you mean, why am I studying for? I didn't tell him that, but I had it in my heart. I told him to be knowledgeable. He says, well, go tell your father to teach you and then come back to me. So I went, and I was more terrified of my father than I realized I did something wrong. So until I went and told him, I really said the right thing, I don't know what, and my answer was wrong. Learning to be knowledgeable is not really the objective, and the objective was learning so you can actually be closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, and so that you can actually contribute to yourself and others. And when I told him the next day that, he took me in. The point is that what's the objective of knowledge? What do you want to learn for? What's just to amass information, or to lead to a realization and transformation? So that ought to be the goal. Once that is there, the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala as the goal, because once it's the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala, it's no longer personal as much. And then also the strength to continue to do that becomes easy. They always say, in order for you to learn on the path of knowledge, you need three things. You need the age of Nuh, and you need the money of Qarun, and you need the sabr of Ayub. So that's difficult to have. You need Allah's help. That's number one. Number two, as you've seen at Madina Institute, the approach must be structured and gradual. It cannot be chaotic approach to knowledge. It must be structured approach to knowledge. So we start with elementary level books, then we go to middle level books, then we go to advanced level books, and also, so there's gradual and there's also a structured approach. And with that, it means al-ulum al-asasiyya, then ulum al-ala, right? The basic sciences of the faith, and then the theology, and then the supplemental sciences, right? So all that stuff must be taken in consideration. I think that's a simple plan to go forth.
Is there a possibility for someone to study on their own, going to a sheikh, doing a particular book? Is there a tartib to follow, or do you need to enroll in an institution full-time like the Madina Institute?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One can learn on their own without a doubt with a book. But like the scholars always said, that learning on your own does not protect you from critical thinking, or does not give you critical thinking. The reason is, when you study a book with a scholar who has studied that book well, they'll give you the book from different dimensions. Look at the statement this way, look at it from this way, look at it from that way, and they add a critical thinking component that sometimes questions what's in the book, either agreeing, disagreeing, adding, subtracting, etc. When you just read it as just words, you may not get that dimension, and therefore you would be just sort of, the book would be your frame, and it may not be enough. So there's that dimension that's not given when one just reads on their own. Having said that, the traditional way of learning was always through interaction with recorded knowledge and knowledgeable people. And that's why they said, for example, لا تأخذ علمك علم عن صحفي أو قرآنك عن مصحفي. You know, you don't take knowledge from someone who just reads, because the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ was that he taught the Sahaba, and the Sahaba taught the Tabi'een, etc., etc., etc. So, and they've always said, those who just read لا يسلم من رعونة نفسه, will never be safe from the ruthlessness of the self, of the nafs. And because you see, the ilm with the knowledgeable people is not just about transmitting information. It's more transformative knowledge rather than just information that is just bare from anything else. And that comes with discipline, that comes with ethics, that comes with value systems, incorporation, all that. And it's much more conducive to learning than simply just to memorize. Knowledge was never meant just to be memorization and retrieval of that information, because in that sense, a memory stick has a much bigger ability.
In terms of those ulum al-asasi and ulum al-ala, how important is the Arabic language, first of all, to learn? What are some of those subjects that you need to learn before going into tafsir, going into all of these other subjects, do you think?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Obviously, at Madina Institute here in Cape Town and elsewhere, we're trying to go as much as we can without having the Arabic language mastered in a level of reading and comprehension, meaning people coming with absolutely no background in Arabic. But there's so much you can teach without the Arabic, because unfortunately the English library or any other language library in Islamic studies, meaning not in just books, I mean in the mother books and the reference books, is extremely poor. And therefore, in order for the student, after a certain, let's say after the 1 year intensive or so, in order for the student to access higher knowledge, in order for that student to access the mother books, the reference value, the books, they actually need to have reading and comprehension of Arabic. So that's very important. Now, when it comes to tafsir or ulum al-Quran in general, or any other ulum, we have al-aqaid, we have obviously al-fiqh, we have al-sunnah, ulum al-sunnah, and we have obviously ulum al-Quran. Every single one of these ulum asasiyah has an approach to it, and the approach again is gradual and systematic. It's also organized. It's not just chaotic. And we start with, let's say, introductory levels to elementary to middle and then to advanced levels. That's what we start with. That's how we approach every single discipline.
Okay. One of the questions that I really want to, one of the things I really want to understand is who is considered a scholar? And you don't do so out of arrogance, but if you really want to contribute to your wider community, if there's a need for scholarship, what level does someone need to get to really be considered a scholar? Not for themselves, or not call themselves a scholar, but to be identified in the society as a true scholar, which can, really be a guide to the rest of that society.
That's a big question. Scholarship, I think, as many of our teachers would put it, is not the mere ability to regurgitate memorized information. So if we take it, let's say, on how Western university system today is, people go to bachelor's degree and then they go to master's and then they go to the PhD degree. I think it's safe to assume that a PhD degree is a beginning level of scholarship. And that's about 10 years. and obviously also it's discipline specific. So no one PhD knows, let's say in sciences, knows everything about sciences, let alone even, let's say, if he's a biologist, doesn't know everything about biology either. It's specific. The same thing applies for Islamic studies. No one that studies 10 years knows everything, is a scholar in ulum al-Quran, scholar in ulum al-Sunnah, scholar in ulum al-Aqaid, and scholar in ulum al-Fiqh. No such thing. When you ask about scholarship, scholarship is defined by discipline. A scholar of what? In what? And then obviously from that, let's say after the PhD, let's say in Western universities today, you start doing your research papers on the field that you're specialized in. That's the postgraduate research and production and publication. That shows, actually demonstrates your the extent, the breadth and width of your the breadth and depth of your scholarship. So I think that's when you start saying, all right, this person is not just regurgitating now, memorize the information, but there's actual an academic approach to scholarship in this specific field, and this person is a scholar in such and such field. It's not as broad as outside in mosques and in centers, you know, so and so is a scholar, it means he knows it all. There's no such thing.
Okay, so just my last question with regards to this part of the interview, Sheikh's takhassus or specification, if I'm right, and perhaps you can correct me, is in hadith. Is this correct?
I would call myself only a student of knowledge, Sheikh.
Is that without any, tawadu or anything?
Absolutely no, without any modesty. I do not consider, I don't think in absolutely all sincerity and transparency before Allah Azza wa Jal, before anybody else, I do not consider myself a scholar in hadith. I consider myself a student of knowledge in hadith. I've spent maybe a couple of decades in hadith. But in all honesty and all transparency with Allah before the creation, I have some attempts in the science, but is it scholarship? I don't think so.
Now, the problem here is, I would love it if Sheikh could possibly elucidate on, your studies in hadith, so that people can understand what it means to really be a talib al-ilm in that degree.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. I mean, obviously first is going after the ulum al-riwaya and diraya, hearing the hadith and being in the laboratory of hadith, from takhrij to tasheeh, tad'if, ilm al-ilal, gharib al-hadith, mukhtalaf al-hadith, mushkil al-hadith, and going into all these things and having some kind of work where you actually, like I said, like sort of like the postgraduate papers, where you do some research about certain hadith, where you negotiate, where you try to critique, etc. So, and that takes time, and that takes training with people who are disciplined in the faith, or in the field. So all that takes time. One acquires knowledge of different basic things in this deen, but I should not try to tell you that this faith is not like the other sciences that are out there. If you want to be a biochemist, a scholar in biochemistry, you need to go through a bachelor's, a master's, and probably a PhD, and then you start doing research in biochemistry. They don't call you a scholar in biochemistry just because you have a PhD, which is about 10-12 years study in it. What's your work in biochemistry, and what field of biochemistry are you a scholar of? You're just not knowledgeable in everything in chemistry, are you? So it's the same thing. In fact, probably the Shari ulum are much more extensive. So it's important not to belittle, to dwarf or have a reductionist attitude to knowledge. At the same time, is not to say it's an impossible task. No, people study, and good students of knowledge can approach different levels of scholarship in a sense of approaching and going and working on themselves. Knowledge is a lifelong process. It doesn't stop until one dies. Imam Suyuti allegedly on his deathbed, somebody came to visit him on his sickbed, and he was saying a couple of lines of poetry. He asked for a pen and a paper and started writing, "Hey, let me know, what is this poetry?" And he's dying. So this is what it is.
SubhanAllah.